Welcome to this episode of Abide in Me, How Jesus Models Secure Attachment with God. This series is a survey of the Gospel of Mark, looking for how Jesus models what is now called secure attachment, which is the physiological, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual experience of what is often called salvation or regeneration or being conjoined with God or enlightenment, individuation, even becoming spiritual. Through the series, we will discover the benefits of becoming securely attached with God, which is the transformation of one's life into one of joy and satisfaction. So we continue with Mark chapter 1. We come to verse 21 and following. Jesus has collected his companions, and now they go off to do their work. Jesus has come out of this ordeal he went through with a sense of mission and purpose, and that was felt by these first apostles and disciples so that they were able to pick up and follow him. And so they go to a large town, Capernaum, and on the Sabbath day, they go to the synagogue like good Jewish men did, and somehow Jesus gets to preach. Maybe the practice was that if someone stepped up and said, "Look, I have something to say," that would happen. And we're immediately told that he taught with, quote, real authority. So he was having an impact on people. And then suddenly, the man who was there worshiping jumps up and he cries out loudly, "Why are you interfering with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Clearly, the man is possessed. It's an evil spirit, we're told, that is crying out, that is taken over the man. And Jesus then reprimanded him. He simply says, "Be quiet, come out of the man." And with that, the evil spirit, we're told, screams, the man convulses, and then goes back to being normal or well. This amazed the people seeing it, and they started talking amongst themselves. What sort of new teaching is this? That he has such authority that it looks like even evil spirits obey his orders. And then we're told news about this began to spread quickly throughout the entire region of Galilee. So Jesus is now committed. He's out there publicly, is impacting people, and he's actually now doing healing miracles, it seems. Now, perhaps you've had this experience as I have had when I've said something very helpful to someone coming from my expertise and my experience, and they get really angry at me. Why did that happen? But you know what's even worse? And I can remember specific occasions this happening, that someone says something helpful to me coming from their expertise and from their experience, and I get really angry at them. Why is that happening? What's going on there? Now, perhaps I am spiritually advanced enough to have remained calm and quiet and polite, right? But inside, there's this passive-aggressive way of reacting to them that is totally unnecessary. I don't know why that's going on at the moment. Now, when I say something intended to be helpful, what's actually happening is I'm manifesting an inner desire to be connected to that person, right? That's what this whole issue is about, that the human beings are wired to be connected to each other. However, my expression of that desire in many cases will become annoying because actually it's coming from my ego. I am projecting from my woundedness, perhaps. I have experienced abandonment in the past, and so I'm afraid that that's going to happen. So I come from a fear of being abandoned or rejected. And the other person will then miss the helpfulness of my comment and rather be caught up by some word I say or the tone of my voice or my body language that is actually manifesting my fear, that is actually expressing my fear. And so the comment comes across to them and strikes them as being dismissive or judgmental or somehow superior to them, right? Some other negative reaction they have, which is likely coming from their woundedness or from their story, from how they've been treated in the past, when words or expressions that I've just said trigger in them these past experiences of being judged or dismissed. So, of course, when they speak up, they will be in defense of their core being or their value or their ego, or it might be coming from this woundedness and they just get angry. So we see that that's what's going on here. This is noticed in psychology a lot. This dance of action and reaction is so common that it's hiding in plain sight. And it's only with practice that we can become able to easily spot it, that we can gain the skill to actually see what's going on. And when we do, it's actually easy to resolve it once it has been seen. The hard part is being able to step back in the moment and to see what's going on, that I am coming from woundedness, that I'm imposing myself on someone else, or that I am reacting from my fear of being rejected or dismissed or judged. When both people stop and observe what just happened and recognize their role in the interaction and where they're coming from, it's then possible for them to make amends. A new dance can be choreographed between them. But going back to the story, when Jesus spoke up, he was being helpful. He wanted to connect with the listeners there in the synagogue. And he had a new voice, he had a new attitude, he had a different style. Remember what he's come out of and this mission that he has now. This was not like anything that they had heard before. They were not used to it. It was unusual. It was foreign. At the same time, it had a power, it had an authority to it. Jesus was, we know, coming from this secure attachment. He knew what his mission was, and he was living it. Of course, I stop and ask myself, how would I have reacted if I had been in that room? Would I have listened intently and welcomed this new, fresh voice? Or would I have turned to my neighbor and in a stage whisper said something about the arrogance of this youngster, right? Where is he coming from? How can he be this way? I mean, I feel challenged. Or might I have suppressed my anger at the challenge that I felt coming from him? Would I have swallowed it? Or would I have been patient? Would I have been able to open my heart to a new idea, a new way of being that Jesus was presenting? I could have done that if I had been in the flow of God's love as Jesus was, if I had been ready, willing, and able to turn, right, to repent, to turn my mind in a new way. Now, Mark tells this amazing story, and it powerfully represents the process of how a wounded soul like myself reacts to a helpful comment, to an observation that actually will help me let go of the pain of the woundedness. And in the Christian tradition, we talk about this of responding to the good news of the coming of the Messiah. And that should be good news, that healing is on the way, restoration is on the way. However, those of us, including me, that have impulsivity and reactivity to what's going on around us, we can be overwhelmed by a fear that comes up in us that we will be dismissed or thrown out or abandoned or ignored, or be told we're wrong. This is likely due to emotional or physical abuse in our childhood or neglect. The woundedness is really there. The challenge for us is to notice when with that pain creates in us a reactivity to some external circumstance. In the story of Mark and in the spiritual view of this, there are these powers of darkness who, as C.S. Lewis points out, really glom on to that pain and encourage us to identify with it. That is who I am. I am that pain, and therefore I am that fear. This, in the story, led the man to defend himself from this perceived threat to his existence, to his ego, to his way of being, his sense of self. "Why are you messing with me?" he screams. "Why can't I go about my business in peace? We are all reasonable men here. We do the commandments. Who are you to tell us that we are not as good as you, or that we're not good enough?" We hear it as criticism. That man was there in the synagogue with the rest of the worshipers. He didn't come across as being insane until this moment, right? Something triggered it in him. Many of us who become annoyed with someone and get angry later look back at it objectively, and we realize that, we made up a whole lot of what we thought we heard. We have these presumptions, these assumptions, this way of listening. We have this story running in the background. Again, in the gospel and in the Christian tradition, we call this an evil spirit possessing the man. And that evil spirit reacts to the underlying message within Jesus' words. Remember, Jesus is coming across from this secure attachment. He's got authority, as it says. He is channeling God's love. And even though this man was not noticeably insane, he was like all the other authentically righteous and observant worshippers in the synagogue. But there was this reaction. The message I get from this is that I am seeking connection just like everyone else is. However, I can be connected and own and identify with those negative, painful experiences that seem to me to define me, that are my ego, that are these evil spirits. And every time someone makes a suggestion that challenges that way of being in me, I have a reaction. Every time the good news was brought to people who didn't want to hear it in the story, they rose up and complained, even ultimately killing Jesus, right? So every time some piece of good news, some encouragement is brought to my attention with any power, with any authority, part of me will rise up in fear of the loss of my ego, of myself, of my existence, because I'm not that way. I identify with this pain, this resentment, this fear. So pause for a moment and imagine yourself in the synagogue. You're listening to this powerful speaker. Your part of you is responding to it. And if you dwell for a minute on what you would have seen and heard in that moment, you might get moved to tears. Jesus is so advanced in his spiritual development that he completely avoids the hook that you and I would have been caught by. He maintains his sense of self. He remains true to his mission. He's coming out of this ordeal that has brought it very much alive in him about his woundedness, about what he fears and what he needs to do to turn his mind and love other people. And so he, in fact, remains connected to that man during his screaming and yelling and his challenge. He remains connected to that man at the same time as he is connected to his own developing divinity. That is how he does not dance with the devil. Right? He remains clear-sighted and pure-heartedly connected, on point, on mission. Instead of arguing with the man, he looks and sees within him that pain and that woundedness, and he heals him by welcoming him, by accepting him, by talking to that other part of him and saying, look, get out of the way, let it go, be gone. And the man then is returned to sanity. So this story encourages us to seek for a connection to other people, to myself, and ultimately to God by listening to what other people say as if it's good news, turning away from the reactivity to the pain that gets touched, to the resentment, to the fear. And we're told in Swedenborgian spirituality that feeling is actually spurred in us by those evil spirits who, again, connect to our materialism, our selfishness, our worldliness, our fear of loss because we're not coming from abundance, we're coming from scarcity, and triggers in us this reactivity that then rejects the other person's reach for connection. And they feel then our defensiveness and our dismissiveness. Instead, we can cultivate, by modeling what Jesus did, the ability to stop and listen and hear what the advice was, what truly the person was trying to do in connecting to us. And then the words they say become helpful, and they become a manifestation of the love the other person has for us, and we can return that love. We experience secure attachment. I pray this has supported your transformative life, whatever practice you have in your life. I want to thank Solomon Keel for his music, and I want to invite you to make a contribution to this work if you wish and are able through the PayPal link. And I invite you to continue to listen to the next episode. You be well.